He stood at the edge of the town square, weathered hands gripping a faded photograph. The crowd had no idea that the unassuming elderly man in the simple suit was about to expose a corruption that had strangled their community for 4 decades. Nobody recognized him now, but by sundown, his name would be etched into the town's history forever. The small rural town had always projected an image of wholesome American values, but beneath that veneer lurked a darkness that few dared acknowledge. 4 years ago, a young soldier returned home from war, hoping to find peace in the rolling hills and familiar faces of his childhood home. Instead, he discovered that his family's century-old farm had been seized through manipulated tax records while he was defending his country overseas. When the young veteran confronted the town council about the suspicious acquisition of his family's land by the mayor's brother-in-law, he was met with mockery and threats. The council chambers fell silent as the powerful men who controlled the town made their position clear. The police chief placed a heavy hand on the veteran's shoulder and whispered that some fights couldn't be won, especially against men with connections that reached the state capital. That night, as the defeated soldier prepared to leave town, he made a promise to himself. He wouldn't fight them today, but he would return when they least expected it. He would spend every waking moment preparing for a reckoning that would expose decades of corruption and restore justice not just for himself, but for everyone the town elites had victimized. For 40 years, the veteran disappeared from the town's consciousness. The corrupt officials occasionally joked about the naive young soldier who thought he could challenge their authority. They never worried about him returning. After all, what could one man do against their entire system? What they didn't know was that the veteran hadn't just vanished. He had methodically transformed himself. After leaving town, he joined the FBI, specializing in financial crimes. He spent decades building expertise in detecting money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. He cultivated relationships with journalists, prosecutors, and anti-corruption officials across the state. Most importantly, he never stopped gathering evidence. The veteran maintained contact with a small network of trusted childhood friends who remained in town. These allies became his eyes and ears, documenting suspicious land deals, unexplained wealth, and mysterious development projects that enriched the same small circle of families. The opportunity for his return came when the town announced a grand celebration marking the mayor's unprecedented 8th term in office. The mayor, now in his 70s, was the same man who had sat on the council that stole the veteran's land 4 decades earlier. The celebration would bring together all the power players who had benefited from the corrupt system, along with state officials and media. 3 months before the celebration, the veteran rented a small house on the outskirts of town using a different name. He arrived with nothing but several boxes of documents and a laptop. His childhood friends were shocked by his appearance. The once strapping soldier was now gray-haired and walked with a slight stoop. But his eyes burned with the same intensity they remembered from 40 years ago. The veteran spent those 3 months finalizing his case. He met secretly with a state prosecutor who had built a reputation for being incorruptible. Together, they organized a task force that would act when the moment was right. The veteran's friends helped him secure an invitation to the mayor's celebration as a distant relative of one of the town's founding families. The day of the celebration arrived with great fanfare. The town square was decorated with banners praising the mayor's leadership. A stage had been erected where state officials would present the mayor with an award for lifetime achievement in public service. The irony wasn't lost on the veteran. As the celebration began, the veteran mingled quietly with the crowd. No one recognized him, not even the mayor who had once dismissed him with such contempt. The veteran watched as the old man basked in adoration, accepting congratulations for transforming the town into a prosperous community. The mayor conveniently failed to mention that this prosperity had been built on stolen land, rigged contracts, and systematic intimidation of anyone who questioned the status quo. When the time came for the award presentation, the veteran made his way toward the stage. The scheduled presenter, a state senator, mysteriously received an urgent phone call and had to step away momentarily. The master of ceremonies, confused by the change in program, looked around desperately for a replacement. The veteran stepped forward and offered to help. Relieved, the organizer handed him the microphone and the commemorative plaque. As the veteran climbed the steps to the stage, a flicker of confusion crossed the mayor's face. Something about the elderly man seemed vaguely familiar. The veteran approached the podium and placed the plaque down carefully. He smiled at the crowd and began speaking about the importance of integrity in public service. His voice, strong and clear despite his age, carried across the square. The mayor shifted uncomfortably in his seat as the speech took an unexpected turn. "True service isn't measured in years," the veteran said, "but in how those years have impacted the lives of every citizen, not just a privileged few." The mayor's smile froze as recognition finally dawned. Before he could react, the veteran pulled out a folder from his jacket. 40 years ago, I made a promise as I was forced to leave this town after my family's land was stolen while I fought for this country. I promised that the truth would eventually come to light." Gasps rippled through the crowd as the veteran revealed his identity. The mayor tried to stand, but the state prosecutor, who had been waiting in the crowd, approached the stage with several officers. The veteran continued, methodically outlining the decades of corruption. He explained how the mayor and his associates had systematically acquired land through falsified tax records, laundered money through development projects, and intimidated anyone who threatened to expose them. As he spoke, large screens around the square lit up with documents, financial records, and sworn testimonies from victims of the corruption. The evidence had already been submitted to state and federal authorities. The investigation had been underway for months, timed to culminate at this very event. While you celebrated your power, 15 state and federal agents have been executing search warrants at your homes and offices, the veteran explained. The sealed indictments against 12 town officials were approved by a grand jury last week. The mayor lunged toward the veteran but was restrained by officers. As the once powerful man was led away in handcuffs, the veteran addressed the stunned crowd one final time. "I didn't come back just for my family's land. I came back for everyone who was silenced, threatened, or cheated by people who abused their power. This town doesn't belong to any one family or group. It belongs to all of you." The aftermath of what became known as the Veteran's Promise transformed the town completely. The investigation revealed that nearly 60% of the town's developable land had been acquired through fraudulent means over 4 decades. Numerous families discovered that properties they had lost due to supposedly unpaid taxes or other legal complications had actually been targeted by the corrupt officials. The veteran worked closely with authorities to ensure that stolen properties were returned to their rightful owners when possible. Where restitution couldn't be made directly, a community trust was established using assets seized from the corrupt officials. This trust funded public works, educational scholarships, and small business loans that benefited the entire town. The most difficult part of the healing process was addressing the complicity of those who had known about the corruption but remained silent out of fear or for personal gain. The veteran advocated for reconciliation rather than retribution, arguing that the town needed to acknowledge its past but focus on building a more just future. 6 months after the dramatic exposure at the celebration, construction began on a new community center at the site of the veteran's former family farm. He donated the land with the condition that it would include resources for veterans and a civic education program teaching the importance of active citizenship and accountability in government. 1 year to the day after the corrupt officials were arrested, the veteran stood once again in the town square. This time, hundreds of citizens gathered not for a forced celebration of false achievements, but to thank the man who had spent 40 years preparing to free their town from corruption. An elderly woman who had lost her small business to the corrupt officials' machinations approached the veteran with tears in her eyes. "Why did you fight so hard for so long?" she asked. Most people would have given up and moved on with their life. The veteran looked across the transformed town, where new businesses were opening, families were reclaiming lost properties, and citizens were actively participating in transparent town meetings. "There's a difference between forgetting and moving on," he replied. "Moving on means carrying what you've learned into a better future. I never wanted revenge. I wanted justice, not just for myself but for everyone." Some promises take time to keep. As twilight fell over the town square, the veteran joined a group of citizens planning the upcoming local election, the first truly free election the town would have in nearly half a century. Young people eagerly sought his advice on community organizing and good governance. The veteran's 40-year promise had indeed changed everything. Not through violence or vengeance, but through patience, preparation, and an unwavering commitment to justice. The town would never again take for granted that democracy requires vigilance and active participation from its citizens. Looking at the faces around him, some bearing the features of friends he had known in his youth, the veteran finally felt at peace. He had returned to a corrupted home and helped transform it into what it always should have been, a community where power served the people, not the other way around. The last light of day caught the memorial plaque at the center of the square. Unlike the self-congratulatory award that was to be presented at the celebration a year earlier, this monument told the true story of the town. It acknowledged the dark period of corruption but focused on the citizens who had finally stood together for justice. The simple inscription read, "Truth has no deadline. Justice is worth the wait." For the veteran, those words represented not just his personal journey, but a reminder to future generations that the price of freedom is indeed eternal vigilance. The 40-year promise had not just exposed corruption. It had awakened a community to its own power and responsibility. As night fell completely, the veteran walked slowly through the town he had once fled in defeat. Shop owners nodded respectfully. Children who had learned his story in school watched with curious eyes. The weight of his 40-year mission had finally lifted from his shoulders. The promise had been kept. The waiting was over. And the change, he knew with quiet satisfaction, was just beginning. The veteran returned to his small house on the edge of town, now surrounded by a community garden maintained by local families. Unlike 40 years ago when he left with nothing but a promise and determination, he now had something he never expected to find again, a home where justice prevailed, and where his long vigil had made a difference not just for himself, but for generations to come. As he settled into his chair and looked out over the town lights twinkling in the distance, he opened a worn journal. On the final blank page, he wrote simply, "Promise fulfilled." After 40 years, the circle was complete, and the veteran finally allowed himself to rest. This is the end of this story. Make sure to subscribe, and for similar stories, I recommend you watch this video. Thank you.